Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Podcast.
What is good, everyone? Welcome back to the Exhaust Notes Podcast. We are here to celebrate Todd's life accomplishment. Danny Ric back in the driver's seat in Formula One. We might record back to back. Like, we might not stop recording now. I mean, this is such great news that, like, we're going to be so motivated to talk Formula One. I think this is a life-changing experience to see Danny Ric back in a Formula One car.
Yeah,
But we'll get into that. What's good, guys? How you doing?
Go ahead, Toddley.
No, please. I want more.
No, I was just going to say this.
Adoration.
Yeah, that's true. What we want to say is we here at the Exhaust Notes Podcast, and as you can see by my username for this episode, I was clearly the biggest Danny Ric fan, not these two yahoos. But I'm so glad that in the year 2023, on June 11th at 8:57 p.m., the secret is still alive. Todd Yates literally spoke this into existence. And here we've been complaining about some of our community members, hi Julie, for not jinxing Max Verstappen because he's going to win every race now and it's not even fun. It's just the Lord works in mysterious ways, and this year the Lord decided to give us the miracle that is Todd Yates and his prognostication skills. Todd, just take it from here. I'm just sick to my stomach.
Our Father who art in heaven.
Helmet be thy name.
No. God, no. Dr. Evil be thy name. I liked it. I like, Nick, how you said that's like my greatest accomplishment in life. I thought it was.
Hi, Coco.
Yeah, I thought it was
Hi,
being
Taco.
married to a beautiful woman, or like, having two beautiful children. But nope. It's getting DR back on the grid. Honey Badger is back, baby. I even wore my 1-of-1 custom dyed Danny Ric official merch just for the episode. It felt like a good day to break it out again.
Nice.
We're back, baby.
Did anybody ask you about that shirt today, given the news?
No, because I just put this on. If I'm honest, I was wearing a different Daniel Ricciardo shirt this morning, or most of the day, which I shared with you guys through text, that said Redemption Day, and it was about Danny Ric's win at Monaco after he lost in like 2016. I think he went back and then won it in 2017.
Right.
So that's where we. It's been a heavy Danny Ric day.
Yeah, and I apologize, Todd. I should have prefaced that by saying, greatest life accomplishment aside from, wife and kids.
No, I think you had it properly right.
Yeah. I think in order, it's Danny Ric.
Let me ask you a question. This will determine whether or not I was correct in that. Have you ever worn two shirts of either your wife or kids in one day? Like two different shirts of theirs in one day?
I will respond to that saying I only own one shirt of my kids that's about my kids, and that's it. And I have zero about my wife. So if the math's gonna math, then Danny Ric's definitely first love. So
I mean, I'm just glad you said it on the show, because like I don't think that's something that people would actually believe, like just casually tuning in if we were talking on Twitter or someplace about how big of a Danny Ric fan you are. Wearing two shirts in one day of the same person or team, that's commitment, man. I applaud it. I applaud it.
Twitter personified at this point. Like, well done.
No, don't put that evil on me. Don't put that evil on me. F1 Twitter.
What are you talking about?
F1.
You're the living, breathing team Danny Ric. Not only that reminds me of Office Space, where there's a question in that movie. It's like, what would you do with $1 million besides two chicks at the same time? If I asked Todd Yates that, I think his default response is, besides wear two Danny Ric t-shirts at the same time, absolutely nothing.
So this is fairly recent news, right? So Todd, I think you got to break it down for people that might actually get this information from us or need a little deeper update.
Well, if you've been sleeping under a rock, it was announced this morning that Nick DeVries, as of effective immediately, is no longer racing for AlphaTauri, which is the junior / sister team of Red Bull Racing. And with immediate effect, he's being replaced by one Daniel Joseph Ricciardo. I don't even know if it's
Joseph is.
I don't know. I'm just gonna look that up now because Daniel Ricciardo.
Let him have it.
Middle name. I hope it's Joseph.
I just think it's crazy that we were all predicting.
Of course it is.
Amazing.
Yep. Anyway,
I think it's amazing that we are all predicting all these other drivers to be cut, and it's De
let's
Vries.
talk about De Vries first, right?
Not that he's shown any reason
Eat your
to
vegetables.
not cut
Talk to us about De Vries, and then just pig out on the dessert.
No, this is like a good counterpoint to this. Is like, do you guys think De Vries deserved to get cut after 10 races? He didn't even make it to mid-season. He didn't make it to the summer break. Like, we know that the Red Bull carousel spins fast, and we can look at like Kvyat and Gasly and Albon and all of that, and Max coming into the sport, like, was all replacements, short-term replacements, I should say. But it's a kind of a bum deal for Nick De Vries. Even granted, his performances have been not up to snuff, but go.
This is my thought. I think if there wasn't friction at the top team, at the Red Bull level, I think he gets more of an opportunity. I think, and I'm not the only person that said this, is I've consulted Todd's favorite portion of the internet, Formula One Twitter. This is more an indictment on how bad Sergio Perez has been. And I think this is a bit of a wake-up call to Sergio Perez saying, if you don't straighten up, there's a Danny Rick-sized hole in your car that we're more than likely going to fill. Because it's not going to be Yuki. They're not going to give it to the likes of Liam Lawson or the hundreds of others in their Red Bull program. This is them kicking the tires, if you will, on Danny Rick as a warning shot to Checo. And I don't think Checo is going to make it to next year as a Red Bull driver. The question will now be, who is his direct replacement? And I think this is where, as we were kind of preparing in the pregame meeting of this particular episode, this might be our unofficial silly season episode now, but that's what I'm thinking. I think if Checo was par for the course, if he was doing his best Valtteri Bottas, we don't see Nick De Vries get the yank this soon and this early. Because I didn't think he was that bad. And I also don't think Yuki's been beating the pants off him to justify such a quick hook.
Yeah, I think I kind of agree. I think that the other reason that I think is really a serious consideration for Red Bull, which we'll get into in a little bit, but like McLaren is fast as hell right now. Like, fast as hell on hards when everyone else is on mediums and softs. Like, it says a lot. But I think that the thing about Red Bull, this is like the thing that makes you love and hate this sport, in my opinion. It's so cutthroat that these guys have to be so good to avoid being cut. But with a team like Red Bull, you have to be like second greatest in the world without any question, right? You can't be the greatest because then we have a problem because now Max has got competition. But like, if you can be the second greatest in the world, everything's A-okay, right? That's Red Bull last season. Checo was flying, not much competition with Max, but got a couple of wins, whatever. And I think that's a really interesting approach. The other part of that with Red Bull and as you guys are both saying, like how it's just competitive at Red Bull, right? There's so many drivers. They've stacked the deck in their favor, so to speak. But we all know that Danny Rick, and this is nothing against Nick De Vries, but we all know that Danny Ricciardo is a better driver than most of the people on the grid. I don't know, maybe top 10, I think I can comfortably say he's a top 10 driver in Formula One right now. He might be a little rusty for a few weeks, a few races, whatever that looks like. But like, given how good the Red Bull car is, I wouldn't be surprised if he's right near the top by, 4 or 5 races from now. And I think that's, and hopefully even sooner, right? But like, that's also,
I don't think it's the car.
What makes it so challenging?
Speaking of challenging, that's the thing I am most worried about is we saw Danny Rick struggle with the McLaren, and I think last year's McLaren is a better car than what the AlphaTauri car that he's about to get into is. So that's where I'm really interested to see it, because if he can pull this out in that car, then he not only deserves to be back on the grid, he should be some lower midfield team's first driver.
But does he really want that? You know, like at the end of the day, a lower midfield team, even Aston is it's not going to be as rewarding and fulfilling for him as somebody who has raced at the top tier. You know, like he had, you know, arguably one of the better cars with McLaren, obviously one of the better cars with Red Bull. I think that I just don't see any of these guys who are truly like top level drivers feeling excited about being the first guy on a middle of the road team, right? They want to win, and it's kind of like Lando, right? Like Lando, you know, like Max has been saying it for a long time. If Lando had a competitive car, he'd be on the podium, and like now he has a competitive car, instantly podium finish, right? Like I think that that's a really tough thing to, like, going back to why I say this whole storyline and debacle and, you know, entertainment aspect of this sport is what makes it so great. Like Danny Rick can be in arguably the best car that's built right now, the Red Bull. If he's in, let's say, an Alpha and is constantly finishing 7th, 8th place in the races as the number one guy and has whomever as his number two, does he really feel like, does it feel rewarding? Probably not, because like all these guys have to be so competitive that if they're not first, they're last, you know, Ricky Bobby, baby. That's just like, I feel like that's like how they have to approach it, because if they let off at all in terms of their determination and their just sheer competitiveness, they're going to end up, you know, falling off and, you know, driving NASCAR or something, you know.
I mean,
Hey, but NASCAR Streets of Chicago looked really cool.
That was,
I have to say,
a spectacle and a farce at the same time. I hope they do it again. I don't know. There's rumor mills that might not happen because it was such a shit show from the rain. But back to the issue at hand. I think the biggest question. So going back to my initial question, did Nick deserve to get canceled? I say yes. Because in a car that's the second slowest, maybe the slowest on the grid, Yuki's been in the points twice, outperforming that car big time. And granted, it's based on setups in the weekend and how the car is developing with the track and yada, yada, yada. There's a million variables. But Yuki's been in the points twice. The closest Nick got was 12th. Their average differential in finishing position is 4 places. So across 10 races, Nick was on average 4 places lower than Yuki, with the biggest gap being 10 and the smallest gap being negative, because he technically beat him twice, but it was 2 races where Yuki had bad luck and or mechanical yada yada. But going further to the Daniel Ricciardo thing, this, I think it's also like on some level scary, because if he comes in and Yuki wipes the floor with him, what does Red Bull do? They're not going to keep Danny Rick at AlphaTauri. Danny Rick is banking his career on the fact that he can come in, handily beat Yuki in a terrible car, and then hopefully open up his options to either that Red Bull seat, which Checo, you know, God knows what's going on with him right now, or prove to another team that he is up to snuff for that, right? The thing that I think has changed in recent history is that he's admitted that he will drive for one of those lower teams, because like Haas and I Alpha, and what was the other kind of lower midfield team that he was talking to?
It wasn't Williams, was it?
No, it wasn't. Oh, maybe it was Williams, I think. He was just flat out not interested in last year. So I like Ro was saying, or Nick, you were saying that you don't think he's going to come in and be like, I want to drive for Alpha and finish at best, P7 a couple times in a season. I think he's kind of realized where he is in life, his age, etc., and just wants to like race on like Terry for Alpha does now, or
By the way, I don't think Terry's long for this world either. Like, I think that dude is checked out, but we can get on that whenever we go to the silly season. The thing I agree with both of you on is, for the most part, this is I would say, win-win situation for Danny Rick, but if he manages to fumble the bag and lose to Yuki, that's it. Like, I don't know how you can come back from that. And I also do worry that if he can't even do that in this hypothetical situation, his standing crumbles even further than those stints in Renault and McLaren.
Yeah, that's kind of an interesting thought. I think I have like kind of a out of left field thought too, as you were asking about De Vries and if he deserved to get cut. Like, of course, no is my answer to everybody, because it's like, hey, give him enough time in a good car. All these guys are really incredible drivers. But
except for Lance Stroll.
They signed even Lance Stroll, man. But like I think that it's interesting because De Vries, they announced a De Vries signing before they picked up Danny Rick as a backup driver, right? So if Red Bull's given that choice again, or maybe they even knew when they signed Danny Rick that hey, he's going to end up taking this AlphaTauri car. We're going to give De Vries a shot, but it's, he's not there yet. Like, De Vries is one of those guys that I think has plenty of life in him to like, bounce around a couple teams until he finds like the sweet spot. I think unfortunately, like the
like as a 28-year-old rookie.
I mean,
he's got the pedigree.
Maybe not like long term, right? But like, let's say, if he, like, I'd say like 3 seasons, right? He's not going to stick around with AlphaTauri. He's going to get a seat, let's say at, Alfa Romeo or Williams or whatever that looks like. Or, who knows? 2 seasons from now, we might have another team or 2. Like, there's all these variables, right? I'm not saying like people are going to be like, yeah, give him 7-8 years. But like, I think he'll probably have 2 or 3 seasons still to like be in and out of cars. I'm not confident that he's going to, blow people away and like, win a championship or anything, but stranger things have happened. But I think that Red Bull actually probably took all this into consideration. They planned for Danny Rick to be a part of this, like, and move into the AlphaTauri, seat. I think that Danny Rick, yes, he's leaning more towards embracing where he's at in life, but like, he's not going to want to be, he's just not going to want to be at Red Bull. Like, I just don't see a situation, even if he gets into the Red Bull seat, let's say Checo leaves at the end of the season, Danny Rick goes into the Red Bull second seat behind Max. It's going to be the same situation he's been in before, where it's frustrating because he's not getting all the attention. And I think, like, and I know this might sound like a broken record for those of you who've listened to the podcast for a long time. I think that people like these guys that are not top 5 drivers, maybe top 7, 8 drivers, absolutely need to be showmen outside of the car. I think that Danny Rick is that. We all love him. He's just a great personality. Like, I think that he's one of those people that could sign with Haas, and I've already said this, but like he would be incredible. Him and Gunther could go back and forth. Like, it would be so entertaining that, like, at that point, who cares if you're winning? Like, yes, of course you always want to win, but if you're selling enough merchandise to, hit your bonus and make that extra money and keep the team afloat, like, that's what it's all about, right? Like, to me, I think that's where Danny Rick is going to land, somewhere where they really embrace his personality and like kind of change the way people think about the marketing aspect of racing in Formula One, because we've already seen like how crazy it could be with McLaren. Not even like, I would say a moderately competitive car, right? Top, 3 team, top 4 team, whatever. And Danny Rick is like all over the place. It's super entertaining. Like seeing him do donuts in a NASCAR in Austin. Like, it's like, all these things that people will have memories about off of the racetrack are what make him so great, in my opinion. There's so many guys that are on the track now that don't have that type of personality or don't have the opportunity to showcase it. Like you have to be so driven and so diehard, like we've seen it with all these guys. We talk about it regularly. Lewis, being like just super uber competitive, like nonstop. And then like once he gets to the point of success, it's like, wow, you can kind of let off and like be more human. And same thing with Seb. And like all of that kind of stuff to me is why he doesn't fit at Red Bull. Like Red Bull's not, he'll be great with Yuki. They already have a relationship. We've already seen so many like,
that's what I'm calling him.
Fun moments between the two of them. But like, Red Bull is super competitive. Max is not, like a prankster of any kind. And Christian Horner is not a prankster of any kind. And I feel like as much as like, I think Ricciardo is as competitive as those guys, he also has fun with it. And I don't think that's a good fit for the Red Bull team, even if Checo gets pushed out.
If he can get the results, they will love him being the clown jester, because ultimately it takes the attention away from Max outside of just his dominance. If he struggles the same way that Checo has been struggling, then you're right. They're going to want to get rid of him even quicker than they did De Vries. So this is truly a make or break moment for his legacy. I'm not going to say for his career, because everything he's done in terms of his previous has established that he's an upper echelon driver. He's probably, I guess this would be a topic for another day, but is he the greatest driver never to win a world championship?
No. There's been a bunch, but we can delve into that.
That's what the offseason's for.
That's a great episode though. Yeah, we should definitely do that one.
But at the same time, it's one of those things where you also mentioned, Nick, the fact that he's maturing now. I think he's fine with it if he's truly come to that self-awareness moment of, if I can push Max, if I can get the occasional podium more so than Checo has been in recent memory, I've lived a good life. The only thing I worry about is for the 12 viewers that actually watched his stream for the 3 races. Like, are they going to replace him with Nick De Vries? Because that would be hilarious.
Yeah, we didn't actually get to talk about that. So I was actually in New York and got to watch the Will Arnett, Danny Ricciardo coverage, and I actually thought it was pretty good. Like it started out really slow. It was a little rough. They both were super nervous, but by the time it got rolling, it was actually really entertaining. I personally, I can't really watch Formula One without having, like the Sky Sports. Yeah, like even when I watch on F1 TV, like it just bothers me when I end up on the American feed or whatever the global feed, whatever the other feeds are, where you've got to go to the global feed to get Sky Sports, right? But yeah, that's an interesting one, right? Like there is nobody else in the sport, in my opinion, that could sit in that seat and be as entertaining as Danny Rick could be as a commentator, right? I would love to see Seb be more involved, publicly, but he's still not going to be as funny as Danny Rick was.
There is somebody, but it would be the complete opposite end of the humor spectrum, and that's one Kimi Räikkönen. And I do think that him just mean mugging the shit out of whatever Will Arnett serves his way would be hilarious in a different way. But I do like this concept of Manning cast in terms of having 2 professionals, because I do think, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, the Seb Vettel and the Kimi Räikkönen of it all seems like a really good match in terms of commentators, because I think if there's one person that could tease anything out of Kimi, it would be Seb. But what do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, jumping in on that telecast of Will Arnett and Daniel Ricciardo, like, I only got to see highlights of it, but it was painful to watch. Like, I could see them doing that as kind of a race replay because we already know what happened and then talking nonsense over it. But, like, they weren't even paying attention to the race, and, like, they had, like, Beastma, like Marshawn Lynch on there for some reason. And he's like, they're asking him car questions and he's just like, yeah, like blue tires out doing donuts or something. Like, I don't know. It was too far off the
reservation.
Yeah, it was just
say that
too far away from the actual race to be like a fun addition, but I could see them doing like a retrospective that way in a fun way. But
it is like way more technical than football, right? American football is like you don't have to watch the game at all to know what's going on for the most part, right? You can hop in at any moment, see who has the ball, see what the score is, and kind of understand, hey, these guys are going this way.
Yeah,
these guys are going this way.
One thing that makes Formula One inherently trickier is, and Todd's going to love this, we're all essentially slaves to the Formula One TV direction. Like, even if we wanted to kind of look at what's happening for favorite driver X or what's happening in this battle for 13th, we're never really going to get that opportunity because we're not Sky Plus members the way our British audiences are, as ESPN and Sky Sports are quick to remind us with every broadcast.
Don't forget to press your red button for Sky Q and Sky Glass customers. Every
time you speak, you push.
Yeah, how do we get that? How do we get that hack over here?
This is a good time to shout out the F1 multi-viewer. I haven't watched a live race with it yet, but watching race replays, you can literally put all the you can be your own pit wall. It's insane. You can have every live feed from the driver on board and the pit lane and the track map and the actual live footage going on. So when they're talking about something on like Sky Sports that doesn't line up with what you're seeing on screen, you can just kind of look at whatever driver's going on, like another part of your own screen. So anyway, that was, a tangent. But the funny thing about this to me is you said like the writing was on the wall and they thought they were going to get Daniel Ricciardo in that seat anyway. It was kind of a planned thing. Is that came out pretty recently, actually rewinding a little. I don't know, maybe a month ago, Daniel Ricciardo went to Italy, to AlphaTauri's home base to have a seat fit. So every time when the people strike that down in the media and say like, oh, it's nothing, just routine in case he needs to race, where I'm like, is it really? If you're going on a full on seat fit, like where there's smoke, there's fire. But then it came out more recently that Helmut Marko and Christian Horner disagreed on signing Nick DeVries. Apparently Helmut Marko, the grand wizard of the Red Bull army, whatever he is, and didn't want him, and Christian Horner did, and I guess got the ultimate ruling vote, or maybe Helmut said, whatever, I think you're wrong, but go ahead. So I think that's yeah, I don't know. Anyway, any more ways to allude to him as like
as a not nice person,
as an Axis of Powers member. Anyway, I'm stoked. I think Danny Rick's going to kill it, and I think within a few races he will be fast in the AlphaTauri, at least hanging pace with Yuki, and still getting 12th at best, which it'll be okay. And then he'll be in the Red Bull next year. And I disagree with you, Nick, that he's going to want to go somewhere to be the front runner, or somewhere that either the front runner or somewhere where he can like be the court jester and have fun with it. I think at this stage in his career, he just wants the odd race win and be competitive, get top 10s a lot, and then he can have his own fun, right? He's still going to, even as a Red Bull driver, he's still going to show up to the Circuit of the Americas on a horse or a giant Cadillac or a fucking Wright Brothers biplane or something crazy Americana, right? I think he'll be fine in Red Bull when he gets that seat. And I'm saying when, because I already manifested him coming back to Formula One in this fashion. I'm going to say he's going to check this seat.
Here's the thing. Speaking of that, for our longtime listeners, we were looking at some of the bets we make before, during, after the season. Somebody on this panel took the over in a Danny Rick racing 1.5 races this year. And two of you, I'm not going to mention who, took the under. So for all of that speculating and speaking into truth, I got a Slurpee out of this, so I'm excited. Now, that being said,
Shout out to 7-Eleven, sponsor the pod.
7-Eleven, sponsor the pod. I am willing to go double or nothing with you, gentlemen, if you are inclined. Over under. You know what? I'll give you guys this. Over under a half Danny Rick 10th place or better finishes this year.
How many races do we have left?
10th place or better. Oh, yeah. He's going to get, I think he gets 3.
You get, okay, 3. Todd?
I would take the over if you're going to say
0.5.
0.5. I would take the over because I think he's got 1 in him. But I do think it's going to take him a bit to get pace in that car. Because like he apparently was he did the tire test for Red Bull, the Pirelli tire test at Silverstone today for Red Bull, and was only like a second off Max's pace for pole this last weekend, which you can say like it is impressive or not. Because a second in Formula 1 is like a mile, but not having driven a car in a long time, I think it's pretty quick. I'd absolutely take the over, but I think you're shorting yourself by taking the under.
I am shorting myself. So
we do.
Nick, you said 3.
So do the over under at 1.5. I'll still take the over.
Yeah, you know what? Let's transfer that 1.5 over.
I'm trying to help you out.
Thank you. Help me.
Can we go back to one thing real quick? Todd kind of like dropped the bomb like subtly and was like AlphaTauri seat fitting. You know, for like the Sneaker History podcast listeners that are listening, a seat test fitting is kind of like when you tell your, spouse or significant other or partner, I just entered the draw, I probably won't win. But then you win, right? Like that's basically a seat fitting in a Formula 1 car is like, oh yeah, it's nothing. It's nothing. But also you might win and you might be driving the car in a couple weeks. So.
And for even further diving down that rabbit hole, for the people that don't know what a seat fitting is, the cockpits that Formula 1 drivers sit in are literally molded within millimeters of like every angle of the driver's body. They use a special foam and they put a little plastic bag in the cockpit and then the driver sits on it and they inject foam into this bag. So it molds like literally into their butt crack. Wow.
Butt dimples.
Yes.
So if you're looking for Todd's holiday gift, whether it's Christmas, birthday, New Year's, any of those things, he's looking for a Kwanzaa. He's looking for a Danny Rick. Yes.
No.
All right. Let's talk about McLaren.
Yeah, let's talk about McLaren because I finally had another Danny Rick thing that I wore. I finally had a reason to break out the very nice Secret Santa gift I got from Iron Trev. Shout out Iron Trev. Because last 2 races we had what? Only in Austria. Only Lando had the upgrades, so Piastri still had a pretty bad. He had a decent race for the car still being slow. I think he was 11th or something.
16.
Okay, just kidding. Pause. Felt better than that. Anyway, but Lando got a P5, I think, and this last race,
4.
Oh, P4. Excuse me. Average it out. We're good. This last race. We had a P2 and a P4 on pace, not any crazy safety car stuff. Actually, the safety car hurt Piastri, Oscar Piastri, if anything. He should have had a podium. He should have had his first F1 podium if he didn't pit right before that safety car. There's a lot of things that I heard about them going into it, but they made significant updates in Austria. They had smaller, further updates for Silverstone. Every team has updates for Silverstone, including like smaller front wings and little turning vanes, or not turning vanes, but little things here and there because it's such a high speed track. But do we think McLaren are back? Is this just us getting overexcited as papaya diehards? Well, not you, Ro, but we know you're on board for friendship.
I know. I am. That's the journey, not the track with the track limits, but the limits of friendship. But it's a step in the right or a pedal in the right direction. I just want to understand one thing. Was anybody else disgusted by the tampering and the full-on bromance that Red Bull was doing in terms of batting their eyelids at Lando? Because I swear they were going out of their way to compliment him. So are they trying to actually move him to Red Bull, or like what was the point of that? Other than that, they drove as flawlessly as possible. And one of the loudest cheers I've heard this year was when Lando took the lead right out the start of the race.
I mean, I think that's just Lando being at his home track, team's home track, basically. The fans there want to see the fans at Silverstone are like still recovering from Lewis losing to Max 2 years ago. Right. And like, I think they just want to see a homegrown, win. So I think the cheering in that was, more based on the actual performance and Lando being at the top. I think it was really interesting how much, not just Red Bull, but like all the teams talked up Lando and the McLaren, right? Like even Lewis was like,
rocket ship.
Almost like, yeah, I forget. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. It's like, it's saying a lot, like he even was like, yeah, it's very similar to the Red Bull, but like it's fast, and then there was, of course, like the commentary on the internet, F1 Twitter and Instagram and memes and all that. And it's just like, it's hard for me to think that it's a fluke of any kind. I'll just say that. Like, I feel more confident in saying that they're going to be on the podium fairly regularly the rest of the year than not.
Well, I mean, I look at it from the perspective of, I believe this is also it for Mercedes. They're not going to get any other upgrades. And if this is a sign of things to come, then yeah, I'd be worried if I was a McLaren hater, because they proved to be competent in a way that I don't think any other midfield team is going to have as successful of a one weekend point grab as McLaren did this weekend.
But
I think the hardest part about the whole thing is actually Aston and Fernando Alonso just kind of falling off, like nothing that they've done brought them up with everyone else. And, like to me, Mercedes, look, they're always going to be like a lurking threat, whether they're on the podium or not. They're capable, more importantly, they're capable strategy wise than, not to pick on Ferrari, but way more capable. But it's so true, man. It's like, they just don't make those mistakes. They're very, like there's been a few over the years where like, I think Lewis not pitting when the safety car rolled out a couple of times. I think George had the same situation at certain points, but like, it's so few and far between for them that you almost like people just naturally dismiss them when they're, fourth, fifth, sixth, whatever. Like Todd's done this most of this season, right? Not picking on you, Todd, but like every time it's like, what did Lewis finish or what did George finish? And it's like 2 spots above where you call it, right? Like that's how people think about Mercedes, and that leaves like room for them to sneak in. I think, even though the car is not as fast as Red Bull or maybe McLaren moving forward, they're still going to be close enough to sneak. I don't think anybody's going to beat Max, to be honest. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if he just wins the rest of the year, but they could definitely sneak a few podiums in that most people are not expecting, in my opinion.
McLaren's going to sneak podiums.
I'm saying, McLaren will. I think McLaren will for sure get probably 4 or 5 more at least.
So you're talking
out of the
about
rest of the year.
Mercedes.
I think Mercedes. Yeah, like just like this weekend, right? Like Lewis did nothing most of the race that would have led us to believe that he was going to end up on the podium. He was there. He was, competitive. The car wasn't, rocket ship fast or anything, but like they played it right, and they end up, edging out the second McLaren car. Like that's just the way I think that's just the way that they kind of had landed comfortably being playing that role.
Yeah, but I mean, Mercedes has been, on average, I would say the second fastest car, right? It started like Aston was like a rocket ship, right? But like between the two drivers, because Stroll is Stroll. It's not even a dig; it's just fact, right?
The man is who he is.
Yeah. So like you have Lewis and George, which are both, top 5, top 7 drivers in a car that's like pace wise, maybe at best third. But if they're both finishing behind Alonso, they're still going to beat him in the constructors, right? If they're just, and one of them sneaks on the podium every time. So I think it's obviously Red Bull's running away with both championships. Between that, or secondarily to that, Mercedes has P2 pretty much locked up, especially if Aston's taking a step back in pace. I think you're overachieving or overestimating McLaren at this stage. I think the track suited them this weekend. The fact that it was like misty and cloudy, because that apparently the McLaren car just mechanically heats up its tires pretty quick and then overcooks its tires on a hot track. So it heated up the tires in the cold conditions really well. So had the pace, but because it was cooler, it wasn't overcooking the tires necessarily. So I think we had kind of the jury's still out on if this pace is real. It's definitely a significant step forward. I mean, in one weekend, they went from, what was it, like P7 in the championship to P5. They're now in front of Alpine and looking like they're going to easily beat Alpine for that. I'm more curious if this pace is real. Can they catch Ferrari? Because Ferrari is...
Bring it on. Just let's have the Ferrari clown corner.
I talked about this in the pre-show, and I think it was before you got here, Nick. We were talking about, like, we always make jokes about Ferrari's ineptitude as as race strategy or their pit crew. But honestly, like, one of their biggest downfalls, and you can fact check me on this, but I believe 4 of the 6 Ferrari powered cars in the last 2 races have blown up. That's not great odds.
Ooh.
Like,
yeah. What? So Haas and Williams. Yeah.
1 Alpha and actually, I thought it was 1 Haas
Williams?
twice, another Haas, and check me on DNFs. I see you Googling.
So
away.
From a DNF perspective, for Austria, the only DNF we had was Nico Hülkenberg. For Silverstone, we had Kevin Magnussen and Esteban Ocon. So yeah, we've had 1 DNF from a Haas driver in each of the last 2 races. I think everybody else finished the race, so I'm not sure where the other ones come in for. It's just one of those things that I know we as a society love a good meme. The burning image in my mind from this race, if you had to ask me to distill it to one screenshot, it would be that dialogue between Max and his race control team, basically saying, hey, what are Ferrari doing? Oh, they're pitting? All right, we'll keep them going then. That's Ferrari. That's who they are.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I mean, it's also crazy to think that Leclerc has 2 or 3 podiums, right? Sainz hasn't podiumed at all, and Sainz has more points than Leclerc.
Because he's been more consistent. Also, he was on...
Well, yeah, because they just, like...
In Austria, I know he finished behind Leclerc for various reasons. But, like, Sainz was the best driver on the track, bar Max, in Austria. He was all over all over overtakes, crazy overtakes. He had amazing wheel-to-wheel battles with, like, Lando, with Checo. Just, he was amazing. And I am doubling down on... If somebody leaves Ferrari, it's going to be Leclerc, not Sainz.
Oh, when we get to this silly season, I've got thoughts about this, but I'm happy you've joined Team Carlos when it comes to Ferrari driving allegiances.
I mean, I feel like that's the perfect segue. We just jump right in.
Yeah, let's talk silly season. So now that Danny Rick has lovingly kicked the door open complete with wig and clown outfit, where do we go from there? So that we think that means that next year Checo's out of a seat, Danny Rick goes to Red Bull. What does that set off?
This is how I propose we do this segment. I think each of us kind of read out our fan fiction. And I think, like you said, Todd, walk us through how Checo is no longer on the grid. Like, fill in any seats and show your work, so to speak.
Okay, before you do that, I got one question for you, Todd. This is going back a little bit. I was looking at it before we started recording. The closest a team has come to winning all the races since, like, whatever, 1950s-ish. 1988, Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. If Red Bull continues this dominance, one, do they win every race? And two, can you actually talk about Max and Checo in the way that people talk about that McLaren team?
You had 2 world champions on that team. Checo is, at best, a very talented, but probably overrated number 2. I mean, actually, I don't know if Senna had a championship in '88. Actually, I think he won his first one in '88. But anyway, there's no way you can talk about him in the same vein, because look at the point standings. Like when it was Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna on the same team, they were battling for the championship up until the final race of the season. I think '88 was the first year that one of them crashed into the other to win the championship. It might have been. It was either '88 or '89. But that's like goes down in Formula One history. But they were literally battling for the championship the last race. Checo has already lost the championship and we're 10 races in. So if anything, it's going to be the one-man show, right? People are going to talk about Max.
That's what I'm going. It's exactly that, because I don't think Checo's going to win another race this year if we're looking at current form. And if that's the case and Red Bull still wins every race, I think we have to start talking about the fact that this might be the most dominant thing we've ever seen in Formula One. Because if that scenario plays out the way that we think it does, Checo took 1 race off of him, and really no other team took any race off Red Bull if that was the case. As for the fact checking on Senna and Prost, it was in '88, and this was the only race that McLaren did not win in 1988, is when they crashed into each other.
Look at the big brains on Brad. Double threat guy. Yeah, I'm a Formula One nerd. So back to the silly season, or Nick, did you have further questions on that?
Nope, that was it.
Max. He's going to go down as probably one.
So you would compare this season more to a, what is it, 2019 Lewis and Bottas?
He's going to win the championship by a mile.
Better in terms of dominance. Yeah, in terms of Max dominating.
Valtteri had a handful of wins and was usually P2, right?
Yeah.
If it was only if like Lewis had an off day. That's why I think like this is going to put Max in the annals, I think the word is, of history.
That is.
It feels like you're saying anal. Let's be real. This is going to put him in the halls of history as probably the most dominant season of all time, even beating 2019 Lewis or whatever 2006 Schumacher, or like, I don't know, pick a dominant season from a driver. 94 Hill, like craziness.
72-10 Chicago Bulls.
73-9. No, that's not it.
70.
It's crazy. But as far as silly season goes, I want to jump to what you were talking about earlier, Ro, because this is probably way down the chain in silly season, but I think good old Terry could be on the hot seat. He's getting super outperformed.
He's gone. I think he's done. Anyway, go on. I'll fantasy book mine later, but I'm in agreement with you.
Yeah, no, I want to hear your thoughts on it because like you brought it up earlier, and I for such an established driver, like what is going on?
I think, put it this way, it speaks to who he is in the pantheon of the sport that this is not that big of a deal, all things considered. Because we've always kind of joked about the fact that he seems like he's quit on himself. He's quit on the team because of all the years he's been asked to be number 2 to Lewis. But I could see him literally withering away into the sunlight because he's done. Like, he has nothing left to prove. I don't think he's ever going to get a podium in that car. I mean, if you guys are feeling strongly about it, let's make a bet about it. But he's done. And I think he's okay. He gets to show his butt on occasion. He's got a gin. He likes to bike with his very attractive girlfriend. Like, that man's living his best life. And we talked about this a little bit with Danny Rick, where it's like, okay, you get this certain maturity when you get older where you're just like, you know what? I just want to enjoy what I have. Let him enjoy what he has. Let him be the greatest crossover star to NASCAR because his hair is already ready for it. And I think so is his body and his mind. And I think he would live under a certain anonymity that he would not be granted anywhere else in the world if he makes that move over. But that's truly the most fantasy of bookings. But I think he's gone. But anyway, go on, Todd.
I think the mustache screams NASCAR too. So
Terry Bottas is going to be a reality the same way that Todd wished Danny Rick into Formula One again.
Could you imagine Terry with just a big old mutton chops and a handlebar mustache in NASCAR? Like, he's weird.
Can you imagine him being...
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, you're right. It seems like all of his interests lie outside of Formula One now, and he's slightly checked out. Even in, like, post-race interviews, he's just like, you got a bit unlucky, and he's very Finnish about it now. When before he still had, like, kind of a sparkle in his eye, he doesn't feel like that anymore.
Isn't it funny how different we think of him responding after races that way compared to like the way Kimi Räikkönen would be like so dismissive to reporters after races?
Always like that. Like 2008 Kimi was that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Terry's the nice man version of Kimi, where it's that apathy, it's that disinterest. He's still gonna answer you and address you like a human. But anyway, talk to us about how Checo is off the seat and like walk us through your plan, and then we'll discuss, and then we'll let Nick and I also go.
Like, so imagine this scenario. Daniel Ricciardo comes in and wipes the floor with Tsunoda. He gets several P10, P9, P8, maybe a P7 in there somewhere, right? Several points finishes and consistently beats him. Checo has missed. Let's remind that this is the fastest car, the biggest margin probably in recent Formula One history. Maybe the 2020 Lewis Mercedes was like just as fast, but Bottas was right there. Checo has missed Q3 in the last 5 races. In the by a mile fastest car on the grid. What the hell is going on with him? Like, he had a win in Monaco, and he won the first or second race of the season. And other than that,
second race, yep, he won. What was it? Jeddah. Okay.
He is underperforming more than Nick DeVries is underperforming right now. I understand why they wouldn't kick Checo now, because getting Danny Rick up to speed would potentially, if Max has a couple of DNFs for mechanical or whatever, and Aston has a 1-2, yeah, right. Ferrari has a couple of 1-2s, gets them closer in the standings. Crazy things happen, whatever. But I think they kick DeVries now. They get Daniel Ricciardo some seat time in, granted, a dog, but it probably has similar characteristics to the Red Bull, mechanically, because they share a lot of the same parts. Alpha Tauri buys a lot of standardized parts from Red Bull. So it has similar maybe braking characteristics or the things that bothered Danny Rick about the McLaren. Get him some seat time in there. Checo continues to underperform, which he's on track for, and probably even under more pressure now that they've got DR back in the grid. I don't think it's going to go well from here. It's definitely operates like a mid-2000s Ferrari Chamber of Fear with Dr. Evil and Christian Horner in there. So they've got all the right things to make a successful team. And then they slide Danny Rick in next year. I don't see at this point, other than Checo getting P2 basically 80% of the time for the rest of the season, why they wouldn't just be like, thanks for the memories. You're on your way.
So then the hard question is, Checo's out of Formula One at that point? Like, who does he just become? Valtteri Bottas? What, he's 30, 33, 34? He's got to be somewhere in that range, right?
He's a little younger, but
most teams are going to invest in a younger driver.
I think he would be a great seat to fill for for an Alpha. The last year before the Audi official takeover.
By the way, Checo is 33.
Oh, he is. Okay. So he's all in the same range. Yeah. I think Valtteri's 33. Danny's 34. They're all in that same vein. But I could see him landing in a midfield team like that, or like even a Williams trying to mentor Alex up even further.
See, okay. This is where I think our plans diverge a little bit. So this is my thought. I agree with you. I don't think Checo is long for the Red Bull. I think starting next year, he is going to be out of that Red Bull driving system. Danny Rick is going to take his spot on Red Bull's second seat. Now, for me, with Bottas also leaving, I agree with you. I think Checo is going to move into that seat. I think you give Guan 1 or 2 more years, depending on when the Audi contract hits. But everything I've read, that's Carlos Sainz's seat to lose. So now in my scenario, I've got a Alfa Romeo /Sauber /Audi team of Checo and Sainz. And then I think you move Tsunoda to Williams because Alex Albon's going to take that Ferrari seat.
Holy hell. But why? So let me continue your train of thought here, but ask a question. You think that Sainz would leave Ferrari being the better performing driver generally, right? Maybe not as high as peaks and lows valleys, but more consistent, I should say. You think he would leave the Ferrari seat, which still for some reason holds like a magical place in every F1 fan's heart because of the longest running team and most successful team. And
it's a question of who's the driver that he would be paired with staying in Ferrari. For all of his struggles, for all of his inconsistency, Charles Leclerc can do no wrong. So Carlos Sainz, in my mind, is never going to be the face of Ferrari, the same way Leclerc is right now. The narrative is not as clean. And I think for all of his success, Carlos Sainz is probably the most decorated journeyman of this generation of driver. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, I think so.
And to the point that you also made about why would he leave, if he goes to Audi /Sauber, I think he can be that face of that car. I don't think there is anybody else that, in my mind, is a viable free agent that could hold the same credibility in new fans' eyes if Carlos Sainz becomes driver 1 for that team, especially if you've flanked him with Checo Perez. The thing with Albon to me is he's warranted his drive as a he's warranted his reputation as a top 6 adjacent driver the way that he's been pulling results out of this Williams. He's not going to go back to Red Bull because that's where Danny Rick is residing in my hypothetical scenario. I think Ferrari makes the most sense for him.
You make good points. Like, I don't really know. Like, it's kind of crazy to think that, and we absolutely could see that much of a shakeup.
And here's the thing. It's not going to happen. I'm speaking wildly out of my butt. But at the same time, to me, it just seems like one of these things that Checo's struggling a way that I don't think we anticipated him ever struggling, especially considering how he used his last year in Racing Point to get that Red Bull seat. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, the pinnacle of his Racing Point career was getting from literally last to first in that race. So Christian Horner could have that moment in Drive to Survive where he literally calls him on the phone and says, "You got the seat." We're a long way from that amicable, warm of a relationship between Checo and Red Bull. I think he sees the writing on the wall. I don't think he's necessarily capitulated, but he just gives the vibe of a young Dante Hicks from Clerks where I'm not even supposed to be here.
No, I disagree there. I feel like he's still, I think it's finally settling in. I think up until this point or until this year, he's felt like I'm here to battle Max for the championship. And now I feel like he's finally like coming to the realization is like, there's nothing that I can do to beat Max. Even if I'm outperforming Max, it's Max's team, but I'm also not going to touch Max's pace right now. And it's just everything, that chamber of fear, like I mentioned, is getting to his head. He needs that. Like the reason he was so successful and so well loved in Racing Point, like he literally saved the team from bankruptcy, and everybody on that team like felt like they owed him their livelihood because he was their savior. I think I can see like your vision happening, but not this year because Audi's not there yet and Honda's not there yet, which I think leads me to another segue.
Please go for it.
Yuki,
I've shot my wad.
I think Honda's really going to press hard at Aston to get Yuki a role there somehow. And I think 2 more years of Lance being Lance, finally Lawrence is going to release the reins a little bit and say like, okay, the team run the team. Mike Crack, who do you want your drivers to be? We gave Lance how many seasons has he been in Formula One now?
I was actually just checking that
like
right
7?
now because I wanted to make a bet with you to see if he is going to reach a decade in Formula One.
Like it's
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's like 8 or 9,
7.
isn't it?
I'll look it up. You guys keep going. His
Okay.
first year in Formula One was 2017.
I'll put him at 6, 7. Yeah, 7 years.
7. Yeah.
Man, my brain's working today. But I think Yuki is the prodigal son of Honda, and Honda making that partnership and like really diving in again. This feels a little bit different for some reason. I don't think they're going to be a flash in the pan, engine constructor again. And not that they were necessarily last time, but it was just really weird timing for them to pull out at their peak. That's what she said. But I think Yuki's going to end up at Aston somehow in 2026.
I mean, the thing about Yuki is that we don't take into consideration is that he's still stupid young. What, 23, 22?
No, I think he's 21.
Like
I think he was 20 when he came on the grid. Yeah.
Yeah, he's super young,
but
right?
Super young.
So yeah, to your point, like that, I'm with you. Like I think Honda's going to push for him to be, a part of whatever team that they really, end up fielding, right? Whatever that looks like.
And I think
Absolutely.
I think he is really outperforming that car this year with 2 P10s, whatever it was. I said he's got 2 P10s this year in this basically the slowest or second slowest car on the grid and it wasn't really in a lucky sort of way. It was like on pace and on fighting through cars to get those. So yeah, I think he's having a hell of a season. He's really proving himself this year, and he's here to stay for the long term, which I've heard so much of, like from just psychotic F1 Twitter, that Yuki's going to be out, and I don't understand why.
I mean, we
I said that too.
But at the same time, I guess my question is, who takes the second seat with Yuki with Honda?
Well, That's the trickier question. Alonso, I don't think there is going to be racing in 2026. He'll be 46, 45 at that time.
Yeah, there'll be somebody. There'll be 4 or 5 different drivers that we're not even aware of on the grid.
And Lance is future world champion.
I think at this point, Lance should just embrace his career as a live-action Twisted Metal driver and just go that route.
Twisted Metal. It's a deep cut.
That's what I do.
Yeah. Man, speaking of Lance, I had so many people text me that were so mad. I don't know why they were so mad about it, because none of them were Gasly fans. But they were so mad about the Silverstone incident where Lance, in their view, purposely bumped Gasly on that, what is it, like turn 4, that really tight downhill hairpin. I think it's just the car. His talent. He overdrove his talent and he lost control of the car and slid into Gasly. It was just a strange thing for the reaction I saw.
Not only that, the other strange thing for me was, didn't Gasly have some sort of impediment from Carlos Sainz, and he was ready to go hammer and tongs at how he's besmirched him, his driving, his reputation, but I didn't hear a word of him go after Stroll the same way. So I'm wondering, like, did Stroll just kind of slide a unmarked metal Halliburton case full of $1 bills in all these drivers' doors whenever he messes up, so they don't speak about such things in public? Like, how does he keep getting away with this?
I think there's like a sniper on a tower. You can see the red dot on his shirt, and he knows whose sniper it is.
I think it's that they don't want to upset Daddy Stroll because they never know if they might be looking for a job one of these days.
Must be that, because it's one of those things where I tend to be the biggest Lance Stroll defender out of us, which isn't really saying much. But even me, I was like, what are we doing? Like, what is going on? Like, he was especially Strolly this past couple of races. Like, I think every race had some sort of Lance Stroll incidents where, really, if you don't know any better, all you can say is, oh, that's just Lance being Lance.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, that's such like the hardest thing about Formula One is these situations where, your dad owns the team. Like, how does anybody ever, completely understand, how does anybody ever not let their son drive for the team when, all jokes aside, he is capable of driving a Formula One car and lands in that top 20 somehow, some way, right? Like, granted, he's got a lot more chances to grow into this car that he's in now than most drivers would ever get. But, he's still a good driver, right? Like, objectively speaking. I know Todd's like burning inside, needs to say something right now, but it's crazy to try to like figure that out, because it could be something that lasts for another 10 years, like if you don't have to win to be competitive, just let your kid keep driving, right? I mean, nobody's going to talk shit on the grid because there's going to be a second seat where they might want a job,
Yeah.
It's absolutely there. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Like, if Lawrence Stroll is serious in his 5-year plan, he has to at some point admit that his son, even if they make the fastest car on the grid, his son is not going to be a part of that championship. And they need an Alonso, or they need a Max, or they need a Lewis, or somebody that's consistently at the top of their game to put them there. And honestly, I think this year's Red Bull is an anomaly. I think the regulations are only going to get twisted tighter and tighter to make the cars as spec as possible, because Formula One itself knows that to keep the growth, the 333 million new fans, as Ronnie Mercado likes to point out, to keep this fan base and keep the value in Formula One that it has right now, we need good racing. Because like even this year, it's down like 40% or something because of the domination.
I don't know. I said that in the Discord this weekend, and Aaron corrected me.
What did you
So
say? Because I've read that ratings are down in Europe, but they're steadily going up in America. So I'm wondering, like,
and attendance is up in Europe.
But the ratings in terms of actual television watching, or
I'm not sure. Like, I think we need to do some digging and actually find out what that real truth is behind all of that. But I mean, I think the other part of it, the Stroll thing that like messes everything up is that he's also really young, 23, 24, right? Like he's been racing for a long time, but he's still really young. So like,
I'm going to say
he's definitely that young.
24 years old.
I think he's 24. Yeah.
That's like a seasoned vet at this point.
He's fair.
Right. But like if your dad owns the team, that means you got 5 more years to prove yourself. No questions.
But again,
you don't talk about age until like 28, 29, 30 in Formula One, unless somebody just straight up sucks. And I know you feel like he does. But like
in the wet, he's like Rain Man. He turns into Ayrton Senna in the wet for some reason. So Lawrence Stroll is going to lobby F1 to put sprinklers on the outside of all the tracks. And finally, he'll be a consistent points producer. But who are you going to replace Alonso with to keep that? If Lawrence Stroll is serious and they're putting whatever, like 400 million into that wind tunnel, and just so much infrastructure investment to make them a real team, a top 3 team or whatever. Which they already have a quick car this year. I know they've taken a step back, but they're still P3 in the championship. And they want to keep building towards the future. Who are you going to replace Alonso with when he retires? That's of the same caliber from the current driver lineup.
I mean, I don't see Alonso retiring anytime soon. I think you get a couple more years out of him. I don't know if he makes it to 26 and Honda's return, but like the thing is, like, his situation with Aston Martin and with Stroll in particular is perfect, right? He plays it up that he's just there supporting his teammate. He's super competitive. He's more competitive in that car than he has been in years. And, like, to be honest, at his age, it's a great place to be, right? Like, why not just keep cutting the checks and racing? You know, like, you're doing what you love. You're making great money. You're getting to sell more Kamoa hats, like at the end of the day, like it's kind of a perfect scenario for him. If he gets a few podiums out of it, or maybe even squeezes out a win or two at some point along the way, like, I don't think he does any better anywhere else. And I don't think he wants to leave the sport. Stroll, on the other hand, seems to be at least respectful of him compared to, the way most of the younger guys act towards, like the kind of legacy drivers and stuff. I think that, Sebastian Vettel leaving Aston Martin is a sign that, like, he's younger than Alonso. He could still be racing and doing the same thing, making money and, supporting his causes and, building his brand up even more. But it's interesting because I assume that the vibe between Lance Stroll and Sebastian Vettel was much different than the vibe between Fernando Alonso and Lance Stroll is. And that's why I think Vettel ultimately left. Maybe earlier than, I would have expected him to, because I don't think any of us expected him to retire.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a shock.
But I do agree with you. Like, there is not a good solution for a replacement for Alonso at Aston Martin. Like, no, I don't know. Like, I just don't see any experienced driver being like, yeah, I'm going to go drive for that team and know that you're kind of second tiered, even if you're first.
Bro, any wild takes? Top tier talent?
I mean, I'm trying to process this all just because of the fact that it is too far off. But if there's one person that's going to give us a proverbial middle finger and say, no, I'm going to drive until I'm 50, it's going to be Fernando Alonso. But I also do think that when it rains or pours, and I could see a scenario where with Lance Stroll pulling out, or let's say Lawrence Stroll pulls out and that means Lance Seat's gone and Fernando Alonso's gone, I could see that team almost not cease to be in 5 years' time, just because of the fact that who knows who's going to be able to replace that. And if it's one thing we've kind of learned about Formula One as a sport, is it's how billionaires become millionaires. And people may be tired of losing money hand over fist the way that they do when they're fielding a not as competitive team.
I don't know if that's really feasible though, because even though like we're not seeing them win, the trajectory of the team is going in the right direction for a Formula One team. Like, and I mean for like a really competitive long-term Formula One team, you know, like they're doing the right things. They're investing, you know, aside from, people not understanding Stroll as a driver, you know, like if you swap any other young driver onto that team, put Yuki on that team, like what better way to like, continue growth with those two, Alonso kind of, mentoring Yuki and Honda coming back down the road. Like that's a perfect scenario for everything in 4 or 5 years for that team to end up being, assuming Honda brings the same kind of reliability that they usually do. That team could be really competitive.
I will ask you gentlemen both this. What is Lance Stroll's current point total right now?
I don't know.
44.
I was going to say
44.
50. So, yeah.
In
50?
No, it's 44, but he's been doing his part. Like I've been kind of impressed with how he's been driving. Where does that 44 point season rank right now in his entire career?
Oh, by far the first. It's got to be.
No, it's still not. No,
I don't think so.
He scored
yeah.
75 points with Racing Point in 2020.
No, but he's only 10 races in. He's got 44 points.
Exactly. He should be able to say this is his best year as a Formula One driver. And that being said, I agree with what Nick is saying in terms of that trajectory is doing well, because I almost don't think you can utilize Fernando Alonso as a comparison point for this year's team, just because of the fact that we don't know how much longer he's going to be. And I would say this, I don't even think Fernando Alonso thought he was going to have as good of a season as he's been having. So it's a better indicator to me to look at how is that second team or second driver facing with regards to having the same form of machinery. And right now, I would say this, Lance Stroll's doing his part, even though he drives like a jackass more often than not.
So, wait, hold on. How many points does Aston have, though? Let's look at teams. They've got 181 points, of which 44 are Lance's. So is that really doing his part if 2/3 of the points, less than 2/3 of the, or less than 1/3 of the points are his? That's like saying Checo's doing his part right now.
I mean, okay. But let me ask you this then, Todd. Who takes someone else from that seat and put them in that car, and do they actually put more points on the board? Outside of the Ferraris.
Nick DeVries in that car, and he'd have more than 44 points right now.
Wow. Hold on.
I disagree with that one.
Entertaining to
I'm being facetious a little bit, but I'm serious. You could take probably 8 of the bottom 10 drivers on the grid, and they would have more than 44 points right now.
This is what we're going to do. I'm going to read them all off, starting at, let's go with number, hold on, where are the driver standings? La-di-da-di-da. I'm going to glamp for time because I don't know what to do. Still glamping, still going for it.
I got it.
There's the page I'm waiting for. Okay, let's start off at, ironically, Lance Stroll is number 8. Okay, we're just going to look at everybody below Lance Stroll because everybody ahead of Lance Stroll is part of Red Bull, Aston Martin, or Mercedes. So, number 9, Lando Norris. Do we think he would score more points in that Aston Martin second seat?
He'd be 10 points off of Fernando
Would he score more points than 10 points only? So he would get...
Yeah. No, he'd be... Todd's saying he'd be at like 140.
Okay, because Fernando's got 137. So, Todd, you're saying if Lando was in that car, he would have 147 points.
No, I would say he'd be like 10 points under him. 127.
Okay, so 127. Okay. So we'll say that's plus for Todd's point. Number 10, Esteban Ocon. How many more points, or would he give you a similar point total to what Lance has right now?
He'd give you 100, 110, easy.
right now with this car. I'm doing this just to make sure that Nick's face turns the same orange that his San Francisco Giants hat is doing. Okay. Where were we? Number 11, Oscar Piastri.
Easy. 100 points easy. Oscar Piastri
3 for 3.
finally had a good car and got P4. I know he's underperformed. I know he's underperformed. You guys can rip me a new one on the next podcast after the next race. If Oscar Piastri has a good car again, or Lando's, top 5 again, and Oscar Piastri is down in 16.
Okay.
No, I think you're right with look, I think Lando and Piastri are the anomalies in the rest of this group. I think that both of them, this is why I'm so big on McLaren still, because the car is now up to the skill of the drivers. I think that team is like in a better spot than they've been in. I know like we can get into tracks and all that stuff, but aside from that, the rest of the guys on the grid, I just feel like are not that much better than Stroll on a regular basis.
I have an argument I want to bring up specifically about this. Lance Stroll has 44 points.
I want to get through a couple more drivers.
Okay, but let me just go on this tangent. Okay. Lance Stroll has 44 points in the third best, at best, or like at worst, third quickest car, sometimes second quickest car. Oscar Piastri in the 7th or 8th quickest car has 17 points so far this year. He's got almost half of Lance Stroll's points in a times a million worse car. Okay, continue.
Is the Aston Martin really consistently the third best car out there?
Race, yes.
Okay. I just want to get through a couple more, and then we can continue this conversation. Would Pierre Gasly score more points than Lance Stroll in this car?
Yeah. I mean, he's good for at least 90-plus points, the odd race off, Yep. Okay, 2 more, and I just want to establish.
Why does the Alpine suck that bad then?
It's the mechanics of the car, I would think, more than anything. I just want to establish what the Mendoza line is for young Todd Yates. Alex Albon. How many more points would Alex Albon have if he was in the Lance Stroll spot?
I would actually rate him higher than most. I would put him below Lando, above Oscar, Pierre, and Ocon.
Okay, so you have him
buck 20,
essentially in
buck
second
25,
place.
Something like that.
Buck 25, my man says with confidence, and that's what we love on the Exhaust Notes podcast.
Okay. Here's the Mendoza line. My nephew turned 10 this weekend, drove his first kart at the track up at Laguna Seca MotoGP. How many points would he have above Stroll if he was in an F1 car? First time ever driving a car. He did actually do really well, to the point where the guys that were running the karting track were like, yeah, just let him keep driving if he wants to keep going, which was nice.
I would say you're
120.
Your 10-year-old nephew, not even having the neck muscles to contend with the G-forces that are in Formula One, would have 47 points to Lance Stroll's 44. Now, this is such a it's turned into just a weird Lance bashing episode. But
I'm over here defending the poor guy.
And I guarantee the minute that this comes out and Trev's done listening to it, he's going to be all in my DMs cursing my name. I'm sorry. I have nothing against Canada.
That's okay.
I don't even have anything against Lance Stroll. It's just that he's 7 years deep and he's still making mistakes of a rookie, like running into people on accident, out driving his car, out driving his talent, yada, yada, yada. I already said all that shit. But like, I would think even checked out Terry could have more points in the Aston right now than Lance Stroll, just because of a consistency basis. Lance Stroll has some high peaks, particularly when it's wet. When it's dry, I don't know where his head goes. He just doesn't do well in traffic in a race. his overtakes aren't great. His like awareness, his pace, like the EA ratings we were talking about, they're not awesome. I'll finish
Here's the
with
thing:
that.
you guys wanted to know, you guys wanted to know who would take that spot alongside Lance Stroll if Fernando ever left before him. If that isn't a spot tailor made for a checked out Terry Bottas, I don't know who else is going to take that spot. Like that would be the definition of keep getting those checks, my man.
Maybe that's what the next move is for Lawrence Stroll's master plan. He signs a double world champion to hype up Lance, get all the coaching tips he can get from him. And then he signs somebody that's checked out like Terry that doesn't mind really not giving a shit and finishing behind Lance every race to make Lance look better.
This is essentially the Lawrence Stroll cycle of hiring a second driver to compete and complete his son. Every other driver is a teaching type, the way Checo Perez might have taught him how to race. And then the second driver is somebody that's just like, hey, I want to get one more year worth of Formula One paychecks. Your Seb Vettels, your Valtteri Bottas. Hell, I wouldn't be surprised if he somehow got Kimi out of retirement, because that would be fantastic. I would love to be at the press conference where somebody asks Kimi what is his favorite thing about Lance Stroll as a driver.
He's Canadian. That would be it.
I mean, I don't think that the team changes at all. I think they run the same drivers next year, probably the year after that. It's going to give us plenty of heated discussion and debate, to have Lance Stroll in the seat. So I'm here for it. Trev, come back on the show and we can have more of this debate in person. That way,
Speaking of Trev, can we have our trade episode? I've already got my trade for young Todd Yates because by a process of elimination, I picked up Danny Rick in our draft.
Oh, nice.
We'll use that as a segue to talk about our fantasy league, and then we'll get out of here because, my goodness, it's fun to talk to you guys, but we always run long.
I'm super not prepped for that. I apologize. I didn't bring any.
I got you. No worries. I've been filling it out over the course of the thing. So at least for our Exhaust Notes 2023 fantasy draft propriety fantasy system that we've built exclusively. So in last place, it's me with 340 points. In second to last place, we have Nick with 387 points. And third place, Todd with 399 points. In second place, Trevor with 431. So as long as he has his second place, he won't be as angry with you about your Lance Stroll thoughts. And then in first place, Aaron just riding that max train with 480 points.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the differentiator this time.
Yep.
All right, I am ready to talk the official F1 Fantasy League. For the British Grand Prix, we had P3. Well, we had a three-way tie for P2. So we'll go with P5, but really P3, full send. In a three-way tie for P2 was myself, the Trav Pete, and Terry Bottas, which I believe is... wait, who's Terry Bottas? Was that you, Ro? Or was that...
No, I was the fighting Ocons.
Oh, that might be Drew in the Discord. And then P1 was Toto Squad. The overall standings for the league. In P3, we have the Trav Pete. In P2, we have Terry Bottas. And in P1, still with a slim lead, which is shrinking every race, myself.
I'm pulling for you. What can I do? Can I crash into Trav Pete's car or
I hope
Terry
so.
Bottas's car?
Because Mr. Game the System Trav Pete wins every Discord fantasy league, needs some sort of extra weight in his car or whatever you want to call it.
Say no more.
All right. I think we wrap here.
Let's do it.
I think
I
so.
also already sent Trav a message and I said I'm sorry in advance for the pod.
I love it.
Can you just let us know what he says back to you?
All right, guys. Well,
Tune in
next time. So are you guys on Threads? Do we need to let people know how to find us on
if you
Threads?
follow us on Instagram,
Exhaust Notes
follow us
FM on
because
Threads.
it's the same username. And now, if you ever want to delete your Instagram, or you can't delete Threads without deleting your Instagram, so they got us. They've handcuffed us to 2 social media or social networks now instead of the 1. Anybody on Blue Sky, hook your boy up with an invite. I just need something to replace Twitter because I'm starting to feel gross about Twitter.
Yeah, I need a Blue Sky invite.
I'm too old for those newfangled social medias. However, I am on Threads because I didn't know what I was doing when I signed up. So
I think Threads has some potential to be, at least for a little while, not as chaotic as F1 Twitter, but still healthy
Todd,
discourse.
I can't wait for you to be the grandfather of Formula One Threads. It even sounds better.
I can't wait to be rethreaded on occasion. Come follow me on Threads on Instagram. Dadshoe, that's SHUE.jpg. On Twitter at dadshoe_ F1 or JPEG or something. I don't know. You'll find me.
What was life like before the war, Grandpa?
We'll put links in the description.
Yeah, you can follow me on Threads, Instagram, RoadM13, on Twitter at RoheezyFashizi1, and then on OnlyFans as the Sanskrit Stunner. Todd or Nick, where can they find you?
Oh man, amazing. You can find me at Nick Ingvall on all the platforms. More importantly, Exhaust Notes FM everywhere, and hit the first link in the description wherever you're watching or listening to this, and join the Discord. That's where all the people that we've been talking about this episode, Julie, Trevor, Aaron, Trav, everybody that supports us and listens to the show, we appreciate y'all. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.